Okay, that was almost a disaster. I had to reload Chrome to get it to actually go live when I clicked it, but hopefully it's working now. Certainly, please tell me in the live chat and in the Moore's Law Z Discord if you can hear me clearly, because I almost thought I was going to have to reboot my PC and randomly make sure everything was working from the ground up. But seems like it's working now, so let's get that confirmation if we can. Uh, bu- 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 Let me check this too. I always wait for you guys to confirm you can actually hear me because it does not let you redo a live stream, and it would be pretty bad if I went on for 10 minutes and you didn't hear me. All right, so you can hear me. Sorry for that intro dead noise for those who watch this and it isn't live. But yeah, welcome to the end of June live stream. For those who don't know, patrons can submit questions ahead of time, and I work through dozens of those. But then also you can submit a super chat. Both of you have a question that you want me to extra notice, or if you just want to support the channel, because this is another way to support the channel. Some people like doing it on Patreon, some like doing it by buying merch or doing something else, but super chats are also a good way to directly support the channel as well. And so do not hesitate. I just go in order and in and through the subjects, taking from both the live chat and submissions that were put out ahead of time by Moore's Law's Dead patrons. So get them in as soon as possible, and I will eventually get to them. In fact, you could submit them now in the super chat, come back and watch when it isn't live, and you should see your question answered there. But actually, first, I've got a pretty exciting leak that I want to do at the beginning of this, like I often do at the beginning of live streams, and it has to do with RDNA 3 and actually also really Lovelace production and when their successors, RDNA 4 and Blackwell, will be coming out. And you see, I actually mentioned this in passing in the last Broken Silicon. In that Broken Silicon, I said that I'm hearing that Navi 31 production may be winding down. And I got a lot more details in the past week, especially actually in the past 48 hours. And so I thought, you know what, let's put this out here at the beginning of the live stream. And actually, I want to try doing something fancier. Hopefully, this works. I'm actually going to try to put a quote slide on screen in a really goofy way. So let's see if this works at all. And there you go. You should hopefully be able to read that, and I'll start reading through it. So my first source here from one of my longest running distributor sources told me that they have been told to expect Navi 31 and Navi 32 production to start winding down soon. Now, this was backed up by a major retailer source of mine, where, to be fair, this person can't predict the future, but at least right now, this month, July, this person says that they are having trouble ordering large volumes of 7900 XTXs, 7900 XTs, 7800 XTs, and 7700 XTs anymore. You'll notice those are all the Navi 32 and Navi 31 products that use the more expensive packaging, the 2.5 3D stacking. Now, multiple SKUs from multiple AIBs also cannot be ordered anymore, meaning that when they say they're having trouble ordering large volumes, there are entire SKUs from people like Asus that they can't even order, and the ones that they can order are limited per shipment. And this is interesting. This is on the Nvidia side. One of my longest running sources, who's never been wrong, told me that mobile Blackwell validation keeps getting pushed back. And at this point, they think it may slip to late quarter one for release. And that's quarter one for release, not quarter one for validation. But basically, this person's saying if there was any hopes that there's going to be a bunch of Blackwell products besides maybe the top two on desktop launching in 2024, that certainly doesn't seem to happen. Then another source here, again, one of my best sources, said that they were just alerted that professional mobile Blackwell is launching in mid 2025, so later than the Lovelace iterations. All right, then. So, what do I think about all of that? Well, I'll break it down exactly how I interpret this. At a minimum, I think AMD is expecting RDNA 4 to successfully fill the niche of the 7900 XTX and XT and occupy it by quarter one. Now, I think a lot of you would go, well, duh, of course, top RDNA 4, even if it doesn't compete with the with the 5090 or the 5080, of course, it should be good enough to beat or at least occupy that space. But that wasn't always true. For example, with like, how do I put this? That wasn't entirely true with like Polaris. There was a while there where Polaris was being sold below the Fury series, which most people concluded they should get Polaris. But it actually so happened, the Fury and the Fury X dropped to like $300. I even saw like the Fury Non-X going for almost 250 at one point. And so it was like, well, if you can make to a 4 gigabytes of RAM, it is stronger than the, RX 480. What I'm seeing here with this winding down of production already is that AMD thinks they don't need Navi 31 anymore, and they certainly don't need Navi 32. So based on that, I do suspect that RDNA 4 will launch in some capacity in quarter 4. And the reason they're stopping top RDNA 3 production this early is they just want it gone by then. So at a minute, although I will say this, there's also a chance maybe that AMD doesn't care anymore as well, and that they're freeing up that capacity to make other advanced stacked products. And they're thinking, even if RDNA 3 is going to be out of stock a full quarter before RDNA 4 is ready, whatever, that'll just build up demand, and that will mean maybe one of our other products that uses some of the same advanced packaging technologies can have more capacity freed up. So I think it's really those two things there, that RDNA 4 is turning out pretty well, or at least well enough that they definitely don't think they need RDNA 3, the top models of that anymore. And that also they really do want as much of that capacity freed up as they can for other products that use those advanced packaging techniques. Now, in addition to that, I also heard that the 4090 production may be starting to wind down as well. I don't have enough people telling me that, so I'm not going to put that in that quote side I just put on screen there. But all of this to me, the 4090 kind of winding down from what I'm hearing, top RDNA 3 winding down, and then the validation of mobile Blackwell kind of being pushed back, professional mobile Blackwell coming out later than when Lovelace did. And that comes someone who has roadmaps, by the way. What that tells me is that, yep, AMD wants RDNA 4 late this year to come out. Nvidia probably wants the 5090 and 5080 to at least paper launch at the end of this year. But notice when I say mobile Blackwell, that would be, not the top die. That would be GB203. I think 205 is one of them, 206 and 207. So if they're pushing that back, that means that even if Nvidia releases the 5080 and 5090 this year, they are in no rush to get other stuff out. They probably just want the top end or something of mobile Blackwell ready when the refresh is coming like February of next year, and they don't have any intention of like the 5060 coming out anytime soon. And so yeah, I think that's kind of exciting here. I will say this as well. I saw some people when they looked at the title of this in the live chat, because you could of course type in the live chat before I actually go live. I saw some people saying things like, great, my 7800 XT is end of life, or of course AMD's ditching this early. And it's like, well, just because they're winding down top RDNA 3 production doesn't mean that they're like it doesn't mean they're discontinuing support for the product anytime soon. It just means they don't think there's a point in having any of those on the market at all once RDNA 4 comes out, to the point that they want to make sure there aren't any left. That doesn't mean like if you get a discount card right now, you should worry about it not working in a year. I don't think there's any worries about that whatsoever. Or at least I don't think you can conclude that from what I just said. And I guess one other thing I'd add to that is, before I went live here, I actually checked Newegg. I didn't check every website in every country, but I did just do a cursory glance at Newegg, and I noticed that the 7900 XTX is actually like going up in price in the United States recently. Well, the 7900 XT continues to go down with decent supply. Why would that be? Well, that would tell you that AMD's probably not shipping a lot of XTXs if they're commanding an almost MSRP in a down market, and that if there's a lot of XT still available, AMD's probably disabling a ton of Navi 31 right now and dumping them to get rid of them at a lower price before RDNA 4 launches. So again, don't take this as 100% confirmation on exactly when RDNA 4 will come out. But if AMD is discontinuing production this early, and it seems like they are, and if you check Newegg and for some reason the XTX is like running out of stock and the XT is like dirt cheap, they're dumping Navi 31 and trying to get rid of it, is what it clearly looks like to me. So yeah, I thought that was an exciting leak to start this video off with. And now, before I get to the questions and let me get to the ad from Micro Center. So as usual, this live stream is sponsored by Micro Center, and right now new customers can get the Creality Ender 3 V2 3D printer for just $99. Check out the link in the description if you're looking for a 3D printer. It helps out the channel a lot, not only if you just buy it, but if you click on that link, it tells you that fans of this channel are at least interested in any sponsors that support it. And additionally, they have a new the store in Charlotte. It's open, so you can go to the new store in Charlotte, North Carolina, and they are about to open up another micro center in Miami as well. And you can get a free 128 gigabyte USB flash drive if you sign up for early access to Miami, because they have an early access period and then a full opening. Sign up for the early access and you'll just get a 128 gigabyte flash drive for free. There's really no reason not to, actually. So check out that link. And there's another link in the description as well for their top deals. Again, check out Micro Center. I think now is a great time, especially whether you're buying discount Zen 4 right now, or a lot of those dirt cheap like Alder Lake i5s and i7s, or you're waiting for Zen 5. That's coming out in July as well. Make sure you check out those deals while you're building your Zen 5 PC then. And so, yeah, support this channel by supporting Micro Center today. All right, so that is the ad there. Let me now put in a new timestamp. Got a tip here from Spencer Walker 21, who says, can't watch live, going out with the girlfriend for a happy hour sushi. Thanks for the great content. Well, I certainly would think you'll have plenty of fun doing that. So feel free to just watch it later, I suppose. But let me, since I've been talking about GPUs here, get to some of the GPU questions, because I know this is something a lot of people probably wanted me to talk about, and that is Lovelace VRAM capacity. So let me just, continue the fancy trend and change the light here. Oh, please hit the like button. We have over 700 people watching. Let's try to get to 700 likes. But anyways, Resident Mexican writes in and he says, hi, Tom. Since the leaks surrounding Nvidia Blackwell suggest that they will have the same memory buses as Ada Lovelace, bar the 5090, of course, does that mean that Nvidia really plans to release everything from the 5080 down with the same VRAM amount, which would mean, again, a 16 gigabyte 5080, a 12 gigabyte 5070, and I don't know, an 8 gigabyte 5060? So he's asking, do you think they would really do this? And if they do this, do you think gamers would react, and will this significantly impact sales? I got to say, check out the links in the description as well. I looked at some recent testing of VRAM. Actually, a bunch of people are doing it right now again, but Hardware Unboxed just put out a piece, and I kind of just ran it, watched it, because I was just sitting there, and it interested me much more than I thought it would, because it clearly to me suggested that the situation's just getting worse, and that if you look at frame times, when people say, oh, it's not usage, it's allocation, it's only allocating 8 gigabytes. Yeah, that's giving you allocated worse frame times, dude. You're allocating a lower frame time, worse frame time. That's what you're allocating with your 8 gigabyte card. And I mean, if Nvidia actually gives any card over 8 gigabytes, any card over $300, 8 gigabytes, I genuinely think gamers would react badly. And what would be my source for that? Well, the fact that they've already reacted badly in many reviews and in many forums to the 8 gigabyte cards that have come out from this generation already. So if they're already reacting bad remember, it's not really even 2024. In 2025, Blackwell cards, if they have the same capacity as last gen, no, I don't think that's going to go over well. The testing clearly suggests that if you want a game in 1080p, you don't just need you need 8 gigabytes for good 1080p gaming. And if you want to go above medium settings in 1440p, you really should have more than 8 gigabytes as well. And 12 gigabytes really doesn't even cut it in 4K for a lot of the latest games. So yeah, I mean, I think that would be a complete disaster. I mean, it was a very damning video from Hardware Unboxed actually on that. But I will say this, we don't know how they're going to configure the lineup yet, right? We know that the RTX 5090 is probably going to have 28 gigabytes of RAM. I personally prescribe to that rumor. I've always long thought that if AMD isn't competing at the top of the lineup, Nvidia will skimp on VRAM for the 5090, so that if you want a 32 gigabyte card for 32 gigabyte workloads, you have to get a professional card. So, but that's still enough for gaming, of course, right now. 28 gigabytes for a 5090. And then they would do 16 gigabytes for a 5080. That seems pretty clear that that's going to happen. But remember, if they have a $1,200 5080 for with 16 gigabytes, right? Which no, I don't think that's fair. But if they do that, there is of course a chance they will just launch a cut down version of the 5080 with 16 gigabytes, and that will be called the 5070 for like 750, 800 or something. There is a chance they could do that, right? These are very, very much so. Seems like the 203 die is quite cost optimized for its performance, and TSMC has lowered prices recently, so they could probably get away with like an $800 or $750 call it the 5070. Not saying they will. And then after that, there's a chance they just don't launch the 5060 till they have the GDDR7 chips that will allow them to get to 12 gigabytes over 128-bit bus. At a minimum, that is what I would advise NVIDIA, and I have to some of my sources at NVIDIA. I've literally said to them, if the 5060 will have 8 gigabytes, don't launch it. Don't launch it. Just don't launch it. Like, wait until it can have 12 gigabytes. Maybe you'll have a 12 gigabyte 5060, a slightly cut down model with 8 gigabytes called the 5050 Ti or something. Well, probably just 5050 at this point. They tend to not do Ti down there anymore for some reason, but then do that. But yeah, that's the both sides of it. Could I see Nvidia skimping on VRAM for most of the lineup again? I could. At the same time, I've had it suggested to me that at least the mobile 5080 is getting a VRAM upgrade versus the mobile 4080, which of course had 12 gigabytes, now have 16. That would tell me that Nvidia does realize they might need to make slight changes here and there throughout the lineup. And so I could see them just having a more expensive 5070 that has 16 gigabytes and then waiting for higher capacity chips to launch the 5060 with 12 gigabytes, or maybe even waiting for higher capacity chips for the 5070 for some other configuration as well. I it would be such a mistake to give 12 gigabytes to really anything over $500, which I guess is the other option. Maybe what they'll do is actually launch the 5070 for cheaper than the 4070 and still give it 12 gigabytes. I mean, so I still would advise people not to buy that because that's clearly not enough RAM for even decent performance anymore. Like decent performance class, it's just not. That's clearly becoming low end pretty quickly. But yeah, I would just caution. Remember Nvidia, they are making upgrades as I've leaked with some of them already. I could see them making upgrades to other ones as well. All right, Nicholas Menard writes in here. Let me change the light, and he says, so I shouldn't be getting a 7900 XTX then. From what I understand from RDNA 4, it won't have more than 16 gigabytes. No, they'll have 16 unless they have a special edition with 32. I already have some games that are using slash allocating. Just say using, dude. Using more than 12 gigabytes on my 6750 XT. Yeah, I mean, the way I look at the VRAM thing too, and if you should wait for RDNA 4 and if 16 gigabytes will be enough for that right now, is like, is it running well though? Like maybe it's not perfect, but are your games still running like 1440p 120, 4K 60, or 120 with FSR turned on or something? Like, are you still happy with your performance this second? If you are, I don't really think there's a need to rush out and get a 7900 XTX right now. Or I mean, and then the other side of that is, I'm sorry, I just don't think you should be getting a 7900 XTX for $1,000. If you can find one for $700, I don't think you'll regret it. But what I'm seeing here is they're all over 900. Yeah. Now, the interesting thing though is the XTs are getting pretty cheap. So if you really wanted to get something now, yeah, there's some 7900 XTs for under. Yeah, here's a refurbished one for 630. I can kind of get behind that. Like, why do you need the XTX? Why do you need to spend another $300 or 1, 2, 3, like 40%? What? 1, 2, yeah, like 40% more money, maybe even actually 50% more money, depending on which model you buy, for 20% more performance. I don't think you do. So that would be my advice to you. Right now, you can get the 7900 XT for 20 gigabytes, not 16, for just above $600. And I do know there were some crazy deals on the 7800 XT, and those might start drying up soon. Like, where is a refurbished one? It's really the refurbished ones I saw that were kind of the crazy deals. Those seem to have all sold out on Newegg at least right now. So yeah, that's $480. So that's So I don't know. I would say if you're happy with your performance this second, why upgrade now? Really, the special time to upgrade was a month ago when you could get a 7800 XT for like 450. I mean, and think about that too. What you're probably going to sell your old card for like 250, and then or maybe 200, and then you'll get a new card for 450. You're paying 250 net to up your performance by like, what is it, like 30-40%? It's like, so that's worth it. But if you're happy now, I might wait. But if you're not happy and you definitely want more than 16 gigabytes for whatever games you use, I mean, I would lean more towards a $650 7900 XT than a $1,000 7900 XTX. And remember, when I say discontinuing RDNA 3, I don't mean not supporting it. I just mean They're already winding it down. So you're probably getting RDNA 4 certainly in about within 6 months, I think. All right, let me see here. I don't see another tips question. So let me continue the GPU questions. Let me write down a timestamp for that. Da-da-da. All right. So let's move on to the eight. Yeah, these are the APU and CPU questions. These ones should be fun. I had some really good questions submitted by patrons for Strix. So Josh Audibert writes in and says, "Hi, Tom. With Strix Halo being delayed so it can stay on 3 nanometer, you said, yeah, the IO die, you said it could have other changes under the hood. The timing of Strix Halo's release is now around the release of RDNA 4. Do you think AMD could have changed Halo's graphics from RDNA 3.5 to 4, especially if they want to call it a new mobile generation?" Um, I mean, I guess there's that slim chance, but I'll tell you what, nobody has told me they've done that. The only thing that seems clear to me is that they've upgraded the NPU to probably 60 tops or more. But that's not really a surprise. You know, I did that Strix leak over a year ago, and Strix was originally going to get 20 tops, Strix Halo 40 tops to be Windows 12 compatible. AMD clearly was like, wait, that would be stupid. Let's just get everything at least 50 tops so that we have the best, experience in everything. So I don't think there was really a priority to do RDNA 3 to RDNA 4 though, too, because I think there's a misconception here about RDNA 3.5. I think you see a lower number and you go, oh, well, that means it's bad. But I mean, didn't Renoir come out release? Did that come out 2019? Uh, No, not the film. I want to know when the AMD APU came out. Google. Let me see. If it loads. So that came out. Yeah, so that came out 2020. So think about that. Renoir launched in 2020 with Vega, and AMD had already had RDNA 1 out for like half a year or something. So there's reasons they did that though. The iteration of Vega they put in Renoir was really, really, really compact, and as far as they could tell, about as efficient as RDNA 1. It had a real IPC increase. Renoir, the APU Vega, over the per CU performance of the desktop iterations that have come out years before it. And it also clocks like an RDNA 1 chip, about like I think above 2 gigahertz, right? Like, so you can't really think of Renoir Vega as inferior, just more compact and meant for an APU. That's what I think you should think about RDNA 3.5. RDNA 3.5, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like it's meant to be a more dense version of RDNA 4 with some of its ray tracing and other features stripped out of it. That's what it sounds like to me. Will it have better ray tracing than RDNA 3? I believe so. Will it probably have better clock performance? Yes, I believe so. Will there be IPC increases? I think so. Better compute? Probably. But RDNA 3.5 to me seems like they went, all right, let's take RDNA 4 and let's just make it fit into a smaller package without all the special compute features that you're probably not looking for. Like if you want really good compute and ray tracing, you probably want a dedicated graphics card at this point. This will do it, but no, that's the point. And I think they might use RDNA 3.5 for a while here because it is an alternative to RDNA 4 to be able to fit into a smaller APU package with higher, base performance. So no, I have not heard that Strix Halo is being upgraded to RDNA 4. I guess I wouldn't entirely rule it out, but everyone says RDNA 3.5. So my answer is pretty much no. And especially informed by the idea that like there's a reason they would even want to use RDNA 3.5 over RDNA 4 in APUs. Let me see here. Let me see. I got a question here from Mr. W. When is RDNA 3 dropping in price? It has. Like, I think if anyone thinks the XTX is going to be $400 and the XT is going to be $300, dude, it's already dropped in price. I mean, there was a period of time where the 7900 XTX was what? Like, wasn't it like $800 a couple weeks? And the 7900 XT is like near 650 now. That's your price drop. It has gone down in price hundreds of dollars, the 7900 XT. And there's a lot of, like the 7600, I think is around 250 or something right now. Like, it's happened. This is the price drop. AMD is selling them off now. And if that's not good enough, wait for RDNA 4, you know. Um, duh, duh, duh. I see a question there about CPU, so I'm going to save that one from Thalo, though. All right, moving back on to APUs. Let me write down a timestamp for this. All right. Gian Violi writes in and says, "Hi, Tom. Does the packaging that you have previously leaked for Zen 6 to have monolithic levels of latency, is it likely to be available also for the recently released leaked Medusa Halo? Is that what your source was referring to with MI450 packaging? Am I wrong to put together all the leaks and think that Medusa Halo could have 32 core CCX on an advanced packaging with 40 plus E's of RDNA 4 or 4.5 or 5? By the way, actually, I think RDNA 5 on a 256-bit memory bus that could fit on AM5 socket. Yes, you are interpreting what I said wrong. So when I was talking about Zen 6 Medusa, the idea is that I'm not 100% sure, but to me, it seems like Medusa is a family that at some point AMD decided to with Zen 6. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but that's what everything I've heard from my sources is pointing to, is that Medusa is like kind of like a Arrow Lake situation here where between all of their different products they can share different tiles. So like Medusa Halo would use core CCDs and then and then a certain IO die, and then Medusa Point might use one CCD and a smaller IO die with less compute units, and then Medusa Ridge would have the ability to probably use. I don't actually know this. I have a suspicion they might have a cheap Zen 5 like IO die for the lower end models, but then maybe they can also put in one of those higher CU count IO dies and just barely fit it in there with one CCD to sell a, I don't know what it would be called, right? A 10900G or something, or 10800G. So they would say, everything below this has, I don't know, 4 compute units. But if you want to get a graphics card with your CPU and save money, but not have to get a GPU, also it's a lot more efficient. We also have this one model here where we put in the Medusa Halo IO die and just barely fit it in. But keep in mind that AM5 is limited to a 128-bit bus. So even if like Strix, for example, Strix Halo is put on AM5, I don't think they're going to be probably, although it'd be funny to test it if they did, putting the fully enabled IO die. I think what they would put on there, and there's a link in the description. This was a leak I put out when the Fox was on Broken Silicon. So please, it's timestamped. Check the links in the description at the bottom of that description and click on it. Halo Low Power, at least as of 2 years ago, was planned by AMD to be this super cut down variant of Strix Halo, maybe even down to 20 compute units, but probably 20 to 28 with a 128-bit bus, meaning it can use AM5's bus. It doesn't, they're just not going to enable the other part of it. And then some amount of infinity cache. And, if you just did that, if you had a version of Strix Halo's IO die that was super cut down, used a 128-bit bus like AM5 offers, and then you put only one CCD and you just kind of made a special compact package, just barely fit on AM5, I think it's plausible that type of variant could fit on AM5 from what I've heard. And it is specifically because I've heard people say that there was some late stage decision to try to make a variance of this be able to fit on AM5. Again, not 100% sure, but I think it's plausible now. That's what you would be looking at. But no, you wouldn't probably be looking at like a 40 CU 256-bit APU with 32 cores somehow fitting on AM5. On AM5, they'd probably just be getting rid of the bad yields of the IO die, which from what I can tell could be just like 180 millimeters squared. So that plus a 70 millimeter squared Zen 5 CCD. You could kind of see that actually fitting in the package if they tried. But no, you're not getting all of it at once there. And as for the rest of your question, referring MI450 packaging, maybe some sort of COWOSL is kind of what was suggested to me, but how do I put this without giving away sources? Like basically some sort of Zen 6 Medusa product shares some of the packaging tech that MI450 does based on which documents they're both on, right? I think I can say that without getting a source in trouble, but they are being mentioned in the same breath, probably using similar technology. And that would be everything with Zen 6 is using this monolithic levels of latency packaging tech, basically. Let me see here. So Quick Jumper writes him. He says, Tom, you mentioned that AMD will soon have a very aggressive CPU release cadence to solidify themselves in the CPU market. Could they try to pull something similar to that with RDNA, or are they not in the same position to do that? Let me put down a new timestamp for this one because it's kind of a big question here. RDNA for pricing. Very aggressive CPU cadence with them. Could they try for something with RDNA? Well, they kind of have done that in the past, right? RDNA 1 came out in 2019, and RDNA 2 came out in doubled performance in 2020. So in a way, it almost seems like they are doing that. You know what I mean? It seems like, yeah, at the end of this year, beginning of next year, they're going to launch RDNA 4, and it's not going to be the whole shebang. But that's a lot like Strix Point, isn't it? And then once they get RDNA 5 together, they might do that, and that'll probably come out. My guess would actually be mid 26, if I had to guess. Not entirely sure about that, but I would guess RDNA 5 might be that far behind it. I'm not, we'll see. I'm not sure of that, but my guess would be between the very end of 25 and mid to late 26. And in some ways, they are doing that then, right? AMD launches Strix Point. About a year later, they launch Strix Halo. About a year later, Medusa. I don't know. Maybe that is what they're doing with that. I think it's plausible. A lot of that, though, is going to hinge on how much this AI bubble keeps going off. I mean, if they can't keep MI300 products in stock, if Strix and laptop APUs are flying off the shelves and they're destroying Intel's mobile market share, I can't help but feel like they're not gonna rush RDNA 5 out as fast. But who's to say? I think it is possible they could adopt this cadence. I just wouldn't assume they're going to do it as consistently because it is very clear to me that the priority for AMD over the next 3 years, so until 2027, it's all about AI and laptop. That is what AMD is focusing on. Could they do some aggressive cadence with GPU eventually? Yes, but if they do, I would expect it to be kind of like RDNA 1, 2, and 3, where boom 1, boom 2, 3 is a little delayed. I could see boom 4, boom 5, but then 6, they're still mostly focusing on laptop, if that makes sense. All right, let's see. We have another question here from Lucas Slicer, who writes in and says, how much market share do you reckon AMD will grab in laptop this gen? Would HP or Lenovo dump Intel in their business offerings so AMD could move some serious volume? No, I'd say there's 0% chance of that. There's no way in hell that HP and Lenovo are dumping Intel. Remember what I've leaked before is that they want to get to maybe 50% AMD, or some OEMs do. I guess I won't say which ones. Um, but they're not. I don't think they're just going to dump Intel, especially not when Lunar Lake looks like it could actually be decent. Intel would have to really like Lunar for Lenovo to dump Intel in a year. Lunar Lake would have to turn out worse than Meteor Lake, and then Arrow Lake would have to be delayed an entire year. And even then, they would still sell some Intel. So no, I don't see that happening at all. How much market share do I reckon AMD will grab in laptop this gen? It's hard to say. I think they'll gain some, but we still have to see how well the Qualcomm products do. I'm not really hearing good things. I don't think they're selling like rock bottom, but I don't think they're selling as well as Qualcomm wanted them to. But that could still eat some market share there. So the way I would probably see this playing out is AMD gains decent market share in laptop, but not they're not getting to 60% or something. And then next year, there's that chance to get to like 40, 50% laptop market share with Medusa if Intel's crazy behind, which they could be. I'm working on a leak here on some Intel stuff. We'll see where that flies. But then at the same time, I think if you saw AMD, I don't really remember where they are in laptop right now, but let's just say they're at like 35% laptop market share. If they went from that to 40% this year, I wouldn't be surprised if Qualcomm got to 5%. Right. And so then Intel's gets to just below or at 50%, because I'm hearing that Qualcomm's eating more of Intel's market share in laptop than they are eating AMD's. But we'll see how that pans out. I've heard that from a couple people, though. All righty here. And then let me answer this tips question here. Thalo215 writes in and says, and let me put another time stamp for that. We'll call this, let's see, AMD laptop market share. And what is this? X800. So Dalo215 writes in, it says, how bad are we expecting the pricing of the X800 boards to be? How are we expecting the pricing of X800? So, X870E and stuff. Uh, I mean, honestly, I don't have any concrete pricing information. I do believe I exclusively leaked the pricing of X600 motherboards, and that was right on the money. Uh, a couple of years ago. So I expect I might be able to do that. We'll see what happens this year. But you know, before I actually have any pricing information from my sources on X800, so this is just me speculating. Um, I would suspect that it's going to be a little more aggressive. And this suspicion comes from I don't know what the point of it would be if it isn't, because it's really not that much of an upgrade from the 600 motherboard series. Like I think for what you get, it will be aggressive. Because what I could see happening is like X870E mandates PCIe 5.0, mandates you have USB 4, I believe. So if you're mandating USB 4 and all of the best stuff, even if some of those products have come down in price, yeah, it still wouldn't surprise me if there's a lot of X870 motherboards that are $300, $400. But if you compare them to the $400 X670E motherboards when they came out, they're probably way better. Like before, you needed $500 motherboard for USB 4. You needed, $600 motherboard for all these features. This time around, now it's 400, and you get the features of the very top end X670E a generation ago. And you could see 870, X870, which is really just upgraded X or B650E. You could see X870 potentially coming in and being like a nice 670 motherboard. My guess would be for like $200 to $300. And so, yeah, that I think that's what you're going to see. So if you look at it, I'm sure there will be some hot takes. Again, this is me speculating on the price, but I'm guessing there's going to be hot takes where they're like, "Oh, they're so expensive again," and these people miss that the X870 motherboards are the same price as the nicest B650. So in other words, cheaper, and that the 870E motherboards are the prices of the cheaper 670E when those came out, and then 840 or 50, I believe it is. Like that one there is like kind of a B650 motherboard for like under $200. So the answer is a little cheaper. Also, they're not rushing out these motherboards for the Zen 5 launch. Number one, because I bet they don't think they need them at all. But I think the other reason they wouldn't be rushing the 800 series motherboards to launch at the same time as desktop Zen 5 is that because they don't need them, they don't want to use the expensive shipping. If you airship these motherboards for a launch right when they're ready, which is what's happened with all of our recent launches. I mean, in memory, like Alder Lake and Zen 4, like they rushed out these expensive motherboards. So you're adding like $10, $20 at least to the price there. In some cases, if it was like during COVID shortages, I mean, in the middle of Christmas, you'd be looking at a $50 adder or something. So them not rushing those, I bet they're just putting them on boats. And they're like, yep, they won't launch with Zen 5, but they don't need new motherboards for Zen 5 anyways. And so we're going to ship these and let them have the cheapest shipping. Why would they do that unless they cared about launch pricing for 800? That's, again, my speculation, my analysis. Technically, I don't know the pricing yet. When I do, I will leak that, of course. Let me see what else we have here. Let's see. All right, we got some more APU questions here. So I guess let me actually then jump to that and put down a new timestamp. Again, remember, click the links in the description to support me at Micro Center, and also hit the like button, people. There are, again, almost 1,100 people now watching. Let's try to get to 1,100 likes. Let me write down, what was I going to say? Yeah, Zen 5 handhelds. All right. writes in and he asks, if you had to estimate, when would we start to see next gen Zen 5 APUs with 3.5 RDNA in mainstream handhelds? Yeah, I'm going to guess it's going to be a bit more delayed than what we saw with Hawkpoint. I mean, with Hawkpoint, some of the first Hawkpoint products were, let me see if, of course, let me just do this again for fun, were, of course, the Minis 4 and V3, which was how I'm showing that leak I did at the beginning. But and the reason is I think a lot of OEMs had already bought up a bunch of Phoenix and were really gearing up for and they also probably bought up some Meteor. Like they were in reality gearing up for Strix. And so I don't think they were demanding Hawkpoint in as large of numbers as they probably are Strix. And because of that, that meant that people like Minis Forum and GPD, I think was one of the first ones as well, which is a handheld, were able to get a hold of Ryzen 8000 APUs before OEMs. They were able to get it to market first. I don't think that's how it's going to work with Strix. With Strix, you see Asus just going all out with this new Zen 5 APU lineup. And I think that you're going to see a lot of OEMs clamoring to get their stuff out in August too. Because Asus is clearly getting most of the launch lineup, launch supply. So I'd say August is when you're really going to get a lot of non-Asus options. And so I think there's just going to be more demand from much bigger players this generation than before. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there were some of them that showed up before then, but I kind of suspect Zen 5 handhelds are going to have to wait until the end of this year. Possibly. I'm sure they'll be able to tease them, show them off, test them, benchmark them, maybe even in Q3. But I would mostly suspect that Zen 5 handhelds, at least a lot of them, maybe there will be one from someone who somehow gets one first, but a lot of them are probably going to be waiting till Q1 because this time around OEMs are buying up the volume. That is my suspicion, but of course I don't know for sure. Let me keep scrolling down here. Let me see here. Travis Sylvania writes in and says, should we be excited for Microsoft's auto super resolutions? Am I thinking that a stronger NPU would give you better performance? Did they say it's going to use the NPU? Let me look here. MS super resolution NPU OS integrated AI technique. But does it use the NPU? No. Explains competitor NPU. Oh, it looks like it might. That's interesting. Huh. Yeah, I think we should be excited. I think we should be excited about PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution. That's what it was called as well. More competitors in this space, the better. And I'll be very interested to see how Microsoft uses this super resolution upscaling. What might actually be really interesting too is if it could work with things like Hawkpoint and Meteor Lake and Arrow Lake, which are all going to have weaker NPUs. Of course, it wouldn't work as well as if you had a stronger one, but it would be interesting if there was an advantage to using Meteor Lake or a Hawkpoint because you could use some version of it for a better experience than if you had a Raptor Lake or Rembrandt laptop. So yeah, I think that's exciting, and of course, a stronger NPU should make it better. But we don't have testing yet, so let's not make any bets. When DLSS 1.0 first came out, they didn't leverage crap well. So I wouldn't place any bets. A lot of times these things launch and they don't work well, and a lot of times they work great. So, but you should generally expect that to offer better performance, I think, or at least more efficient upscaling, right? Mexi Man and Cheese writes, and it says, any chance that the next Steam Deck will have a USB 4 or Lightning port for external graphics, or maybe an external PCIe port? I mean, I don't know. I don't have any source that's told me this one way or another. So I don't take this is me guessing though. I think it would be a wise thing for them to include, that or Oculink. Especially the next gen Oculink, I believe, has ridiculous bandwidth. Just because this really could become a real console for Valve. I mean, it is a real console, but imagine if they put in something like, I don't know, a souped up Kraken, like a custom version of Kraken with like 24 compute units and 16 megabytes of infinity cache or something. If they put that in the Steam Deck 2 and then let you plug it into a TV, I mean, at that point, you're looking at something that's probably just below like a PS5 if it uses RDNA 3.5 even, with the higher IPC. It probably not quite a PS5 actually, but you'd get to the same experience. To not include an Oculink, especially because it'll probably be launching right after the Steam Deck comes out, and that I think is going to have pretty high boost clocks in docked mode. I think it'd be smart for Valve to do that. This is definitely something people want, and you could see a lot of people if it's priced aggressively, and it could be because it's subsidizing. This is actually a console. Valve subsidizes the cost. You could see this be a situation where because it has a subsidized cost, Valve is selling a full PC for like $600, $700 that gives you a PS5 like experience. Although it costs more than a PS5, guess what, guys? You can use it as a desktop, and it actually performs well as a desktop. I think it'd be very wise for them to do that. I think it would be. So I would expect something. Not seen you on a live stream for a while. Keep going. Well, thank you for the tip, Tech Kev. I will be going for at least another hour, I think, here. All right. So that's the end of those tipped questions. So let me now get, yeah, let's do this. Let's go into Intel, because let's get to the Intel questions here from the patrons. So let me change the colors and put a new timestamp. Let's just make it 45 minutes. Okay. All right. Kenahoon25 writes in and says, "Hey, Tom, with the recent leak of Arrow Lake Performance saying that it has a 20% single core increase over Raptor Lake, sounds plausible to me. I'm having a bit of a hard time believing it because at the same time, they have it barely stronger than the 13600K in multi-core. It doesn't have hyperthreading. How believable do you think this performance is?" Now, I don't remember if this was the leak that some people were saying was fake. So I'm not going to comment on a specific leak because I don't know which one you're referencing without a link. But I will say this. I am working on some new Intel information that I'm pretty excited to get out there. And I do think I'll just let a cat a little bit out of the bag right now. I do expect Arrow Lake to have higher IPC than Lunar Lake, but I'm not going to say an exact number today. So 20%, is that plausible? It's plausible, I guess. Although to me, that sounds a bit high unless they manage to get their boost clocks to like 6 gigahertz or 6.2 gigahertz, which I guess we'll see. It might, but I'd say that's kind of closer to the upper estimates of what I am expecting. I really don't expect more than a 25% total single threading increase with Air Lake right now. So that would actually be within line what I leaked, but the lower bounds of what I leaked there. And with regards to multi-threading, I mean, what would I'm gonna do some really, and this is really rough scratch math. 0.33 times 0.2 plus 0.66 times, I don't know, what would that be? 1.35. Just being kind of generous. So barely multi-threading barely stronger than the 13600K. So I don't know what model this was. I don't know. Yeah, so I look, unless you tell me the core count of this Arrow Lake model, but I would suspect that Arrow Lake is going to get to a multi-core performance increase of probably, I don't know, 30% or something or more, something like that. If everything turns out well. And so without knowing what core counts you were looking at here, because the 13600K is 6 plus 8. So what model would that be if multi-core is that? So you'd be looking at that times, I can actually do this math. 13, so that would be that times 1.2. And then what if I multiply this times 2 divided by 6? That would suggest to me this might be a 2 plus 8 model of Arrow Lake. But I don't think it can be that because, well, I don't want to leak some stuff that I've heard actually. But that would suggest to me, I also typed that wrong. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Well, but if that would suggest to me that it's probably a laptop 6 plus 8 Arrow Lake that is power constrained in that benchmark. That's what I would suggest that probably was. But it's plausible. The scores you mentioned, 20% single threading increase over Raptor Lake, but 13600K multi-core. That sounds like a 6 plus 8 Arrow Lake, probably around 25 to 45 watts. So I think it's actually plausible. But I know one of the recent Arrow Lake leaks that came out, someone told me it was fake. So no comment on a specific one. Soldier 789 writes in and says, "Will Intel target business class laptops with Lunar Lake with cheap screens and RAM, or will that still be belong to the Raptor Lake and Intel wants Raptor Lake to be seen as a premium, a Lunar Lake to be seen as a premium product?" Well, they clearly want it to be seen as a premium product. Everyone wants everything to be a premium product now, whether it makes sense or not, to be fair. But I think Lunar Lake could do very well in business laptops, actually. You've got that Intel brand name, which is still really strong in the business laptop class. It only has 8 threads, I should say, but they are 8 cores. That's probably good for business. And if it's more efficient than the competition in that package, its integrated graphics don't really seem like they'll be better at gaming, so not better frames per second than Strix, but its integrated graphics have better compute capabilities than Strix, suggesting that for professional use, better. So I think Lunar Lake's best niche actually is premium business laptops. That actually is my opinion. I think it would behoove them to do that. But because it's their only Windows AI, or what is it, Copilot Plus APU ready this year, they're going to pretend it's for everything, even though it's going to get swamped by Strix in CPU performance and maybe not even win GPU performance. But business class laptops, I think Lunar Lake actually occupies that niche very well from what I'm seeing here. Gian Violi writes in and says, "Hi, Tom. I've heard from multiple friends at different companies that their IT departments." Let me make sure I'm not missing the tipped question here. Yeah, okay. So, anyways, sorry about that. Gian Violi writes in and says, "Hi, Tom. I've heard from multiple friends at different companies that IT departments are not likely to procure AMD. Some of apparently it is that they don't really care. That's their attitude. But more interestingly, there seems to be a big vote of confidence in Intel because of reputation from the past and ability to ship volume. Yeah, I mean, there's a big thing here with like corporate laptops where it's like they just want a new one every 2 years. They want it to be loaded up with their features. And if you can give them a ton of them, that works out well, you know? So, says, do you think that as corporate customers are huge install base, do you think this is a strong enough issue to hold AMD back in laptop surpassing Intel market share? Is there room for AMD to have more supply than there is demand for it on working on it in workstation and corporate customers? Um, I think AMD has enough avenues to get rid of Strix right now than just corporate. Obviously, that's what they want to get to, but I think you're going to see a big vote of confidence in them out of Asus and Lenovo and HP. Even Dell will probably use them to some degree here. MSI, of course, is Intel and Nvidia's new lapdog, so I don't know if they'll even have them, but I still think they're going to be able to get way more buys on Strix than they got with Hawkpoint and Phoenix and Rembrandt. And if they have any oversupply, I think they're going to just send them to desktop early, as I talked about in the recent Broken Silicon, as the 9800G or something, 9850G maybe even. You could see them saying, "Hey, here's the inefficient yields of Strix. We have extra of them. You know who wants these? Minis Forum, GPD." And then that's where at the end of this year they just start sending them these models as like bin handheld versions that clock lower or something. And then they also send them to desktop and say, "Hey, this is almost 3050 performance, and this thing costs like $400. It has 10 cores and it has the equivalent of like a $150 GPU in it." So, hey, $150 GPU, the equivalent of like a $300 CPU. You're saving money, one package, and they'll try to just get rid of it there. So I don't think this is a huge, well, it's an issue for AMD, Intel's stranglehold on corporate laptops, but it's not like they are not going to be able to take some market share in every other department right now. That would be more of an issue I would see if they still can't get into corporate laptops with Zen 6 or 7, which who knows? I mean, from what I already just said, I think Lunar Lake will be great for business laptops. Who know? And I think Panther Lake probably will as well, as I'll probably talk about next week. So you could see that being the last holdout for Intel, where they're just doubling down on Lunar Lake and Panther Lake, and like we will not lose big corporate customers, and that will probably be the hardest nut for AMD to crack. Yeah. PC Dog writes in and says, "Tom, with Alder Lake seeming to be an exception rather than an Intel is back moment, and with Meteor Lake being a bust as well, I have little hope for Arrow Lake. Has Intel forgotten how to make good generational uplifts for their CPUs without needing tons of power?" Well, so I suspect that Arrow Lake will prove this answer to be no. I do think it'll be substantially more efficient than Raptor Lake, and so will Lunar Lake as well. However, that doesn't mean it will be enough or that it's going to win, right? I think Intel is going to prove that they're done going completely buck wild with power consumption with Arrow Lake and Lunar Lake and Panther Lake. But at the same time, it's yet to be seen if that's going to be enough to stop AMD from continuing to take market share. Because I think a lot of people will listen to this and go, "Oh, well, Arrow Lake will be efficient and it might win some performance metrics against Zen 5. Doesn't that mean Intel's back?" And I would go, "Yeah, I don't know if that's enough. AMD's launching first. Zen 5 is cheaper. It's going to win some categories of performance. I think Intel is going to really need to be like 20% more efficient with Lunar Lake. And Arrow Lake's going to need a good solid 5-10% win over Zen 5 and at least to tie X3D at a reasonable price, or no one's going to care because AMD can charge less, as I've already leaked and seems to be confirmed now. And AMD can win this price war. So if AMD can win a price war, you got to win in performance, and you got to win by a lot with how much mindshare AMD has right now. But I think there's no way Intel isn't taking the recent reliability and power consumption issues of Raptor Lake seriously, and that they are going to turn a new leaf there to some degree soon. All righty, let's see. So, Clean Sweep writes him and he says, what would it take for Intel to clutch it out to 2026, 2024, and 2025 seem like big hills to get over if Lunar Lake and Air Lake don't live up to even conservative expectations if AMD is going to be delivering mostly on all cylinders? Yeah, so I basically already answered your question, Clean Sweep. Let me see. Intel's achievement needed. Lunar Lake needs to win efficiency. Okay. At least 20% against Strix. It is not going to cut it if it trades blows with Strix because Strix costs less to make than Lunar Lake, and it has 12 fucking cores and 24 threads, whereas Lunar Lake, 8 cores, 8 threads, and half of their cores are weaker than all of the cores in the 12 core Strix. It's not even, it's going to be a blowout in CPU performance, Lunar Lake versus Strix. So that would mean that AMD could take their cheaper APU and cut it down and still beat Lunar Lake at everything. That's not a good place to be in. Lunar Lake needs to win efficiency at 15, 20, 25, and 30 watts by 20%. And Battlemage needs to at least trade blows or beat Strix's integrated graphics. Lunar Lake's a niche product. So if it doesn't win a niche, it doesn't win. It's that simple, people. And then Arrow Lake needs to win by solid 10% at reasonable prices. Panther Lake needs to innovate on Lunar Lake, because it's really a replacement of Lunar Lake. It's not some next gen everything thing. And then Arrow Lake Refresh needs to deliver and compete with Zen 6. That's it. This is done here. After the disaster of Meteor Lake and Battlemage seemingly not showing up to the party, Intel can't have any more misses. Intel needs Lunar Lake to deliver, and I think it might, but then they also need Arrow Lake to deliver, Panther Lake to deliver, Arrow Lake 2.0 to deliver again and deliver on time. No more missteps. They need to keep delivering here because AMD is making, from what I'm seeing here between Strix, Halo, Medusa, that's like 3 generations out of AMD over the next year and a half. And all of them, I think, are going to possibly win performance. So if Intel isn't launching stuff that at least fills its niche well and launches on time, I think they're in danger of just being pushed out. So that is what they need to do to get back to where they need to be before they launch Nova Lake. Sorry, just got a message here. Okay. All right. Cole Addict writes in and says, do you think with Intel basically extreme overclocking their CPUs to the point that they degrade fast, that reviewers should compare their out-of-the-box performance only or add the this won't kill you in 2 years power profile in their testing? Yes. I think the new, what is it, ordained by Intel officially, like what is it, like 188 watt default profile for Raptor Lake, that is what they should be using at Gamers Nexus and Hardware Unboxed, in my opinion. They should be, because the amount of stuff I'm just hearing, not even from retailers and distributors, about how many returns are happening here. There's a ton of them, and they're accelerating. I'm also hearing from game devs that they're having trouble testing games on Intel platforms here. What that tells me is this really is a problem, and it's not fair to run these Intel Raptor Lake chips at 400 watts because they're all going to break. And if that was true of AMD's products, does anyone here think that they would get that past? They wouldn't. So I mean, I think benchmark in websites now and YouTubers should be running Raptor Lake. I don't even know if you show the top overclock one. I think you should be doing the default setting if you're doing the default setting of Zen 5. Although in reality, I think a lot of them do show Intel with the 188 watt and then the unlocked limits, and then AMD with PVO on and off. So you got to show both now, though, because if you don't, I just, especially with the i9 and i7s, i5 maybe it's okay, but i9 and i7s, it's just not an apples to apples comparison, people. You got one person, be like if you had 2 runners and you were like, well, this one's doping on steroids and did some meth before he started running. Like that type of thing is not a fair race between 2 competitors. You can't say that. All right. Brian Robinson writes in, he said, if you had to guess, what are the odds Arrow Lake desktop will have hyperthreading? Very, 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 very low. I mean, from what we've seen so far. Trying to think if I have. Yeah, I haven't been told they're getting it back right now. So I think there's a good chance Diamond Rapids has hyperthreading next year with its line code iteration, but I don't think there's a good chance Arrow Lake does at all. And what we're seeing in leaked benchmarks so far, although I don't know how many of them are legit, I guess, seems to suggest that as well to me. All right. Oh, quick correction here. One of my contributors just wanted to make sure that I say, where is it, that AMD is at more like 20% laptop market share. Okay, well, so not at 35 right now then. All right, so I answered Brian Robinson's question. Let me see other tipped ones here, if any of them line up. We got a GPU on there. We got we got that one. All right, let's move on to a few more of these questions. We'll leave it on blue right now, but let me put down a timestamp. I don't know how long this will be though. Mage and 5080 laptop. All right. So Error 0x7cf writes in and says, hi, Tom. Are there any updates about Battlemage on your end? Other rumors seem to suggest mid-range cards with 28 to 32 EUs and recent shipping manifests. No, I've already told you guys that laptop Battlemage seems to be canceled. Top end Battlemage is canceled, and no OEMs no OEMs or AIBs know anything about it. Literally, when I ask some AIBs about Battlemage, they say, "What's Battlemage?" It's not in development with them. So I think anything you're seeing here is a very limited edition launch. I'm not 100% sure, that's my suspicion, from Intel, just to get rid of the wafers that Intel already bought, because Intel signs contracts with TSMC, and I'm pretty sure TSMC, after the debacle of Alchemist, which Alchemist came out a year late, and that really pissed off TSMC. They said, all right, if you're going to buy up all this capacity for Battlemage, sign here and here as well. You are buying it. You are buying it, and you are launching it when you say you do. And we don't care if everyone cancels. You're going to at least buy these wafers and dump them in the ocean. And so I think that's what Intel is going to do. I think AIBs aren't interested. I think OEMs aren't interested in Battlemage. I think laptop ain't happening. Top desktop ain't happening. And you're just going to see some like low end fart that happens beginning of end of this year, beginning of this next year. And that's what I said would happen in my ARC effectively canceled leak. Go watch the video. ARC effectively canceled. Alchemist was going to be a drawn out launch with things coming out late. We didn't even see the A580 until a year after it came out. And then I said, you'll see some sort of chiplet and weak launch with Battlemage. And then it's unlikely anything comes after that outside of a really low end Celestial, maybe just to keep driver development going. That's not a full lineup. Now, one thing that I will look up here is I do think it's funny what you said here is dead Battlemage leak. It's nice when your channel gets big enough that you can just Google your leaks and they pop up. Yeah, so how many XE cores would that be? 32 EU. I think you mean 32 core, right? Or is it 32 EU? Or you must mean core times 128. Right. Yeah, that's what I think you mean. Because how many cores? Because Meteor Lake's 8 core. So it's 8. Yeah. So 8 times 32. Yeah. Or maybe double that, because they might double the amount of EUs per core. But yeah, so yeah, this is what I leaked. Let me look here. Which one though? I need to find which one's my most recent update. Here it is, I think. Yeah. My leak from the beginning of this year. Yep. I'll put a link in the description for those that are. Yeah, it was the very beginning of this year. I forgot that this video wasn't last year. It was in January. So I'll put a link in the description for this as well. What you're describing is what I leaked 5 months ago, which is to say low-end stuff. And again, some people would look at this and go, "Oh, this isn't low end." But if they're not increasing the amount of XE cores between Alchemist and Battlemage, that's now low end. I mean, think about it, right? I mean, that'd be like if the 5090 had the same amount of SMs as the 4090. Uh, that would now be a mid-range card. So the same amount of EUs to me would suggest this is a low end, and they'll try to call it mid-range probably, but a limited edition low end launch because they signed a contract with TSMC and have to get it out. And that's what I said that was going to happen both 2 years ago and beginning of this year. So all I have to say is I'm glad other people have come around to the information I had at the beginning of this year finally. All right, let us move on here. I see some Switch questions. So let's actually move on to the console questions here, as I did want to talk about that for a bit as well. All right. I don't know what color to use. Oh, yeah, I usually use green for Switch since it's NVIDIA. Davis writes in and says, "Hey, buddy, how are you doing today?" Fine. I got a crusher about the Switch 2 power. Is the Switch 2 going to be good or no about the power? Well, how do you define good? Check out my Switch 2 leak that so far seems to have been corroborated by other people. I am told that the design of the Switch 2, the APU in it, which started as 8 nanometer, but I could actually believe has become Samsung 7 nanometer by now. I've seen those rumors. No one's told me that. I believe it with how late it's coming out. This thing was supposed to be out a year ago. It was built to hopefully run at around 5 watts at handheld mode, so less energy than the Switch uses in handheld mode, I believe, and then be pushed really hard in docked mode. I don't have an exact number. My guess is that they want to run this thing between, I don't know, 400 and 800 megahertz at 5 watts, and then they want to move that thing all the way up to like 1.2 to 1.5 gigahertz. I don't remember off the top of my head because I know my leak pulled up. And then that model or that form factor will run at 15 to 30 watts. And what you'll do is probably have a fanless, thick heat sink inside of it, but then you put it into a dock, maybe something opens up and a fan blows all the heat out. Now you go from cooling 5 watts to cooling 25 watts. That's what it's going to do. So now when you ask me, is it going to be the power going to be good? I don't know what that means for you. What I'm telling you is they want it to have a better battery life than last gen and higher boost in docked mode than last gen. Is it going to be as efficient as Strix Halo? No, probably not. But Strix Halo is a lot more expensive and uses 3 nanometer and 4 nanometer nodes. And what I basically heard is that compared to like a 5 nanometer AMD chip, this thing in 5 watt mode was competitive in efficiency, because that's all it was built to do, is be efficient at 5 watts and then boost high. And it is using a bigger die than some of these smaller AMD APUs. And so I think it's going to, if you like the Switch, I think you'll like the Switch too. Let's put it that way. I think it's going to deliver a generational performance improvement that can play most PS5 games, not remotely as well, but it'll have more RAM than the Xbox Series S, and its CPU will be weaker, but its GPU will probably be somewhat comparable to the Series S in docked mode, meaning you can probably throw that thing in docked mode. My guess is what it will do is like run, I don't know, some sort of upscaled 4K with a base resolution that's really low but looks all right. It might even be like they do. It wouldn't surprise me if what they do is like DLSS balanced or performance mode from like a base resolution of 1080p to like half 1080p or something, and then they interpolate that into a 4K image with some dedicated upscaling chip inside of it to run on a 4K screen. Then you put it, you pull it out of docked mode, and it just runs at like a third the clock speed, but now it's 720p, which is a fourth or so of the base resolution it'll be doing, or a third of the base resolution. So that's what I think they'll do. The only thing I think you're gonna have to worry about with the Switch 2 is frame rate, as it is not very strong per core. I mean, it has more cores than the Steam Deck, and in terms of total load, I think it can run a modern game. But if a Steam Deck's running a game at like 90 frames per second, because I think the Steam Deck OLED can go to 90, right? If you have a game that runs well on the Steam Deck at 90, my suspicion is on the Switch 2, it will run at 60 and maybe a shaky 60, but it will be running at a higher resolution, maybe even with tiny amounts of ray tracing on. And then if a Steam Deck game is running at 60 frames per second, again, you'll be running it at a really unstable 60 or maybe even locked 45, locked 40 frames per second VRR on the Steam Deck in docked mode. But again, higher resolution in the Steam Deck with the Switch 2. And if there's a Steam Deck game that you got to run at 30 or 40, I'm sorry, they got to run at 40. Like a lot of people play the Steam Deck at 40 frames per second. Yeah, I mean, that means that the Switch 2 is going to run at 30. So that's how I would see the difference, but still running the same games. And because it has more RAM, I think it will run them. Like, it'll run them fine. It's just, I don't think any of that would bother someone who liked the Switch 1. In other words, if you like the Switch 1 and you hear, oh, now it runs on a 4K TV, okay, and it's sometimes running at 40 or 60 frames, what an upgrade. Half of Switch games seem to run at 20 frames per second now. But if you're someone that doesn't like the Switch, yeah, you're probably going to want to get a GPD or Steam Deck too, because clearly you want something better than what Nintendo tends to put in it. But this will be quite an upgrade, and I think it will make the Switch people happy as long as they can sell it at a solid price, which I don't remember what I leaked. I think it was like $400 or something is what I expect this thing to be sold for, 400 to 500. All right, let me see. I do think I may have skipped one question. I did. Mexi Man and Cheese writes, and it says, I have a 4080 laptop right now, and I'm itching to upgrade next gen. Do you think the 5080 laptop will have more than 12 gigabytes of VRAM? Yes. Yeah. Mexi Man and Cheese. I've already leaked that. Google. I think I did that in a live stream, so maybe that's why you missed it. Go on to Moore's Law is Dead and search 5070 laptop. I believe in a live stream. I confirm it. Yep. They are going with, as far as I've seen, 16 gigabytes for the 5090 laptop and 16 gigabytes again for the 5080, suggesting that it is a cut down 5090. So there you go. And my suspicion is they will wait and then do a higher capacity GDDR7, like what would that then become? 24 gigabyte 5090 Ti laptop edition at the end of next year. It is also what I guess, although no one has told me that's going to happen. That's just wild speculation on my part. All right. Let me see here. Naughty DJ Aftershock writes it and says, took a look at the Department of Defense's supercomputer list. Of the 8 non-classified ones, 6 use AMD, 1 uses Intel, and the upcoming ones, 5 are AMD and 3 are Intel. Yes, I mean, I recently had a defense engineer on the podcast. I believe it was a month ago, somewhere around there. Check out that episode. They are starting to switch to AMD in governmental contracts as well. So again, and obviously Strix isn't used for these supercomputers, but like when you talk about, oh, well, this customer, like I think SAP is probably going to keep using Intel for a long time, that company. Just as an example, it's like, yeah, but so many other people are switching to AMD, both in laptop and server, that there's still room for AMD to take market share. And I don't think they're quite at the spot where it's like, if they're not taking market share heavily in every single category, they're in trouble. Although to be fair, relatively speaking, AMD is taking some more of that corporate laptop market share. I mean, again, actually the defense engineer said that, like, you never saw AMD laptops in business. You never saw AMD business laptops ever 5 years ago. Ever. Not 1%. Now you see them. Maybe it's 5-10% of business laptops. I don't know what the number actually is, but that's a lot more than 0. So that does tell you some headways being made there. Okay, so I got through these tipped questions. Keep them coming in. I'll probably, let me check the calendar here quick. I will probably keep going for another, let's see. Yeah, 15 to 30 minutes. So if you have any more questions, get them in right now. And let's see. Let us jump to, I've gotten through most of the GPU questions, I believe. Let's go to, I know we have all these FSR and DLSS questions as well. Well, let's get through Qualcomm right now before we round out everything. All right, let me put down a timestamp. All right. Qualcomm questions. QH Freddy writes in. He says, do you think that there are people at Microsoft who genuinely think that switching to ARM will make people hate Windows less? How deep does the ARM brain rot go? Because clearly it goes beyond internet fanboys. I would recommend this to everybody here. Go watch, if you really want to get into like opinions about what's going on with Microsoft and Qualcomm, Definitely I would say listen to the last couple broken silicons because we get into that heavily. But also go watch the newest or one of the newest videos from Wendell at Level 1 Techs. He just did an X-Elite, basically combo review analysis and small podcast, actually, is how you might describe it. And it's pretty damn in here. And he gets into like why Microsoft would be so heavy on Qualcomm. Now, my opinion has long been with the reason Microsoft, there's two reasons really, that Microsoft really wants ARM laptops and the X Elite to be a success. Number one is they are sick and tired of the stranglehold Intel has on laptop markets. And I think there's literally a quote of someone at Microsoft saying, we're using the X Elite because we want to get that damn Intel sticker off our laptops. So I think there's some, maybe a little bit of bad blood there. Just not bad blood, but like they're just exhausted with only having one choice half the time. And they're happy AMD's doing well, but they know that if AMD takes the entire laptop market, they're just going to raise their prices. And so they're like, let's get something else out there from a company that can ship in volume. And that's what we're excited about. I think there's that. I also think there's something here where Microsoft is both just kind of building for the future and playing to investors. Like I said in my AMD Soundwave leak, which is an APU AMD's working on that uses ARM, Google it. That a big reason for AMD to make an ARM APU is just to shut investors up. Because I don't know what there is going on here, but like investors just seem to think ARM is magical, even though when you benchmark it, it doesn't seem to be more efficient than x86 processors. So, you know, the way I would look at it is, yeah, but it doesn't like, do you want to be right or do you want to make money? And I think AMD with Soundwave and Microsoft with X Elite, at least in what they're attempting to do, they want decent ARM options so they can say Microsoft has ARM just like Apple and we can do anything Apple can. And that's it. And the problem is it doesn't actually seem to be any more efficient. So, yeah. I mean, that's what I think is going on, but Wendell really talks about this idea of like if the reason Microsoft likes ARM so much, he actually says he thinks Microsoft wants them to be able to easily bid against the x86 competitors. So it's not just like making sure they have option, but it's making sure there's more bidding to the bottom now so that when HP is looking at AMD or Intel, Qualcomm can come in and say, all right, the launch wasn't great. Let me sell you this at half off. And then AMD and Intel are going to have to compete with that. So that's a short-term reason Wendell brings up. But another one I remember him bringing up is just in general, like they're hoping, I don't know, they're just hoping if they switch to an ARM platform, a lot of the bugs they used to have could go away. It's funny too, Wendell mentioned the OneNote or the OneDrive catastrophe, like OneDrive destroying your filing system and messing with your files just to shove things into the cloud for absolutely no reason. I just had to deal with that this 4th of July. My girlfriend got Red Dead Redemption 2 and I couldn't get it to work. It was because OneDrive was fucking up all of the files on her desktop, which was enabled by default, and her files weren't actually on her PC. And I had to like claw it away from Microsoft. Like I uninstalled OneDrive, then had to reinstall it to turn off some settings, and then I still had to back up her files to a USB because it just deleted the files when we disabled OneDrive. And it was like storing certain file types in the cloud with only shortcuts to them on her desktop. I mean, good Lord, what a disaster. And I don't know. There's all these weird decisions into Microsoft's making. I think they should focus more on making Windows actually fucking work before they worry about if switching to ARM will make their code base better. So I don't know. Check out Windows. I'm probably doing a horrible job of summarizing. It's just the things I remember from it. But check out that Wendell X Elite analysis that came out a couple days ago. It's really good. Chris Rich writes in. He says, welcome to the middle of the year. Yeah, it's hard to believe we're already halfway through this year. If the X Elite had been x86 instead, how well do you think it would sell, assuming its performance was about the same as x86 code as it was on ARM code? So the only way I can really interpret that is a performance boost. So you're right. So you're saying if the Qualcomm X Elite actually was an x86 APU, and because of that, the ARM benchmarks, the ARM optimized benchmarks, it performed like that in everything with the CPU. I mean, yeah, I think it would do better. I think it actually would, and if it had the same efficiency, and so it didn't have any compatibility issues, I think it would have gotten great reviews. Now you have to remember though, the GPU in the X Elite sucks for non-ARM reasons. It's just not as good. It's hard to do a good graphics card. You can brag about its specs all you want. Doesn't matter if it doesn't actually perform that well. Intel learned that the hard way with Alchemist. So, and with Meteor, like not even beating Phoenix, despite having significantly stronger on paper integrated graphics. So I still think you'd have a situation like if Qualcomm didn't. Basically, the question is if Qualcomm didn't have any compatibility issues and ran everything like an x86 CPU, I still think you'd have a lot of reviews going, it seems to game a little worse than Phoenix, but that would be better than where it is right now, where half the time it's worse than like, what is it, even as good as Rembrandt half the time? I don't think it is. Like worse than a Steam Deck. You know, I think people would say, yep, now it games about as well as Rembrandt, so it's like 30% behind Hawk Point and 20% behind Meteor Lake and integrated graphics. But you know what? You get 20% better battery life. All of your apps work great. I think it would have gotten good reviews. Honest to God, if it wasn't for those compatibility problems, it still would have had some microcode issues. It still wouldn't have had the best iGPU, but it would have gotten far better reviews than what it's getting right now. Let me see here. All righty. And let's see. Oh, dang it. I didn't do that other Switch question. Let me just get that right now to Zephyr Zero writes in and says, Tom, any hints as to when the Switch 2 will be revealed? We know a good bit about its hardware now, but when will we actually be able to get to see it in action? Please ask around. I did ask around and I was told probably quarter 1, but that's what everyone else is saying. So I in no way is the first person to say this. Um, you know, and honestly, I don't even think you really need a source. Like Nintendo said they're launching the Switch 2 before the end of the fiscal year. So that's March of 2025. And so far, when I look around, it doesn't seem like it's ready this month. So I think that just tells you, without any sources, that the Switch 2 is launching between October and March. That's when it's launching. And that's 1, 2, 3, just a 6-month period. So that's not even a huge range. That's when it's coming out. People I asked around today because of this question, which again, remember, if you join the Moore's Law Ed Patreon and submit questions ahead of time, I will sometimes ask sources your question and then answer them live. But it seems like quarter 1 to me. That is when it seems to be coming out. All right, let me also put this here. PSS. Let's start a new timestamp, shall we? PSSR, FSR, and DLSS. This is the final stretch of questions, so put in those tipped questions now if you want to. Also, again, check out the links at Micro Center. All right, let me change the lights. Duh. All right, Chris Rich writes in. He says, any idea if standard PS5 will support Sony's PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution upscaling technology, and specifically if it will support AI upscaling? I suspect it won't due to the lack of AI acceleration in RDNA 2 and the standard PS5. I suspect the same applies to FSR, and AMD are probably waiting for the better AI acceleration in RDNA 4. Either way, if AMD doesn't announce AI enhanced upscaling for FSR this year, I think they're going to look rather dumb. I would agree with that. I mean, look, they need to announce FSR 4 when they announce RDNA 4, right? They need to. I agree with that. But the documents that I saw for the PlayStation 5 Pro, they never mentioned the base PS5, and they mentioned using like 300 tops in its AI engine or no, not AI engine, I think just in the GPU to hardware accelerate the upscaling. So I think, yeah, PSSR is just for PlayStation 5 Pro. And I think AMD is just going to go use FSR 3.1 or whatever for the base PS5. I mean, they already have FSR in some PlayStation games. They don't need it, to try to put some special version of that there. Um, duh, 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 duh. All right. So, yeah. And now let's move on to these questions here. Let's see. No tips, right? Nope. Okay. All right. So, Swiggles writes in and asks, hey, Tom, why are we not getting DLSS 4 with the launch of the 5090? And why is it because of the reduced budget of the gaming division? So this is in reference to some leaks I put out a year ago, I think, where I spoke to some people at Nvidia, and they were complaining that they should have proportionally gotten more funding to keep up with releases. Like that was part of the reasons their Starfield launch wasn't as optimized as it could be. However, note that I said they weren't getting the spending increases other divisions were getting, and it was becoming more and more work to get DLSS perfectly optimized for every game, because they basically do it themselves for devs a lot of the time. I never said they were getting less funding, just that they thought they should be getting more. Like basically, as Nvidia makes more gobs of money, they're sending the overwhelming majority of that to make more AI stuff, than they are sending to get more GeForce stuff. Doesn't mean the GeForce division isn't getting, budget increases. It's just, and again, this is not a number I've heard. I'm just throwing numbers out. Like if they get a 10% budget increase this year, the AI division gets a 50%, 60%, something silly like that. So yeah, I mean, that's basically what I heard. It's not that they're like cutting GeForce or something. But additionally, I would expect DLSS 4 around the 5090 launch. I mean, I have no source on that. I just expect it. But yeah, I expect a DLSS 4 at least teaser for the 5090. We'll see what that really means in practice. But they're yeah, for sure, I think. All right. The Bacon House Collective writes in and says, what are your thoughts on FSR reviews? Since AMD is not a hardware gating their newest upscalers, how frequently can we expect subsequent new FSR releases? And do you think Intel will give up on XC super sampling if AMD reaches DLSS parity and just use FSR? I mean, so far to me, it seems like FSR 3.0 has closed the gap a bit, which it desperately needed to do. But think about it. I think AMD just closed the gap from where they were a few months ago. So, uh, you know, a year ago, I thought AMD was a bit behind DLSS, and then DLSS 3.5 and 3.7 come out, and now FSR 3.1's come out. So AMD's closed the gap from where they were a couple months ago with FSR 3.1, but Nvidia's been moving that gap this whole time before now. So, the way I see it, and I'm going to talk to Ancient Gameplays for the next episode of Broken Silicon. So if you want to submit questions to me in Ancient Gameplays, we'll be talking about the latest Radeon driver increases and then also how FSR 3.1 performs. Jeez, can you guys hear Jessie barking? She's being a terror down there right now. Anyway, sorry, that distracted me. But like so yeah, I mean, if you want to submit questions to me in Ancient Gameplays, join the Moore's Laws at Patreon right now. But the way I see it is maybe slightly better than where AMD was a year ago. When in DLSS 3.2 and stuff, and when 3.1 was coming out, it looked bad. When 3.5 came out, well, 3.5 had some issues, so it looked kind of bad. But by now, with DLSS 3.7 versus FSR 3, Nvidia was clearly in the lead. Then you just go to 3.1. But so I'd say maybe around where they were a year ago, because FSR 3 frame generation actually seems to be as good as DLSS 3 frame generation. But compared to when DLSS 3 came out, AMD has not closed that gap, is how I would put it. All right. Florida Man writes in and he asks, the new FSR is improved, but still inferior to DLSS 3.7. Today, how much would you say DLSS is worth over FSR? Or put it another way, for an NVIDIA and AMD card with the same VRAM and rasterization, I assume you mean same efficiency as well, how much more would you be willing to pay for DLSS? For me, because there's also usually a ray tracing advantage with Nvidia right now. Now, if AMD closed the ray tracing gap, which I don't think we expect them to anytime soon, I think then I would say 10 to 15%, but right now I'd say 15 to 20% more. So if you have the same VRAM and performance, if there's a $500 AMD card, maybe I'd spend 75, 600 for the Nvidia equivalent, but it better have the same VRAM and raster, and that's not what you're seeing right now. Like the 4070 Super only has 12 gigabytes of VRAM, and that's a major issue. So that's what I would say, 15 to 20%, which is, I think, basically what I would have said a year ago. Because again, a year ago FSR was worse, but a year ago DLSS was worse. And one caveat too, just because I would recommend 15 to 20% would be the difference, that is not what I think it takes for AMD to take market share. I still think it's about 20 to 25%, maybe 30 for things to massively outsell Nvidia at the same level of performance and stuff, and it's really not, again, it's not just about DLSS, it's ray tracing performance and also mind share that AMD needs to overcome. All right, Quick Jumper writes in and says, "Will AMD improve the improvement rate of FSR? It is getting very similar to MI300. They have very good hardware, but the software is always lagging behind." I really like this question here. Actually, let me put a timestamp for it. FSR rate of improvement. So I think that it's kind of hard to say, or it's complicated how I would explain the cadence for FSR improvements. I think a lot of us were disappointed that it took AMD so long for FSR 3.1 to come out over FSR 3. Like it was like, what is going on, AMD? But now that it's out, there are some improvements. There needs to be more because of ghosting, it seems like. But they're trying again here. I think until we get machine learning accelerated FSR version, so FSR 4, if you will, it's going to be hard for AMD to make big improvements. I think there'll be like a 3.2 that fixes the ghosting, and 3.1 probably this summer. But after that, I think we have to accept here, people, it is like a miracle that AMD is competitive with XE super sampling right now in quality, um, with something that does not use hardware acceleration, and that they're even remotely close to Nvidia, an AI company, in upscaling. You know, Steve at Hardware Unboxed, review of FSR 3.1, he said that in motion, actually, in several games now, yes, if you pixel peep, DLSS is better, but it's not noticeable in motion anymore. That's kind of a miracle AMD's even achieved that without using hardware acceleration. And it's going to be very hard for AMD to catch up anymore when I believe they have kind of run that well dry. If AMD wants to catch up to DLSS and hardware acceleration, I mean, and upscaling performance, they need to do hardware acceleration. And so what I think we're going to see is over the next year, there'll be a 3.2, maybe a 3.3. You will see AMD improve FSR, but not at the rate DLSS is still. But then when FSR 4 comes out, that's when the cadence is going to increase. And you'll be seeing FSR 4, 4.1, 4.2, 4.5 all in 1 year or something, because AMD finally has the tools to innovate quickly again. You know, it's not a good analogy, but it's almost like, what if you like, yeah, it'd be like if you told someone to like make a sword out of bronze and make it as good as an iron sword, and the best swordsmiths in the world were like 85% there. And then you were like, well, how long are we going to get the next upgrade and sorting, and swordsmithing not sorting, swordsmithing technology? You need to switch to steel, with more advanced techniques. And then once you do, that's when you'll see all the innovations because you've unlocked a new technology to accelerate it. That's what AMD needs. So I think it's going to be still kind of slow updates, although I think there will be a 3.2 this summer. But once they start using hardware acceleration with RDNA 4 in the PlayStation 5 Pro and RDNA 5, that's when you're going to start seeing multiple updates every year, because now it's easy for them to find things to improve when they're kind of just optimizing an algorithm right now without using any AI really to upscale it. All right, so that is all of the pre-submitted questions. If you have any last-minute questions in the Moore's Laws at Discord, put them in the after video chat right now for free, and I'll see if I can get to any of those. Again, you'll get access to that free questions and loose ends if you join the Moore's Laws at Discord. And then I think we did have at least one more tipped question that I don't want to miss here. So Joni writes in and says, which upcoming x86 APU would you wager would be closest to the Switch 2s or at the same power? Hmm. My guess would be between Rembrandt would be Hawkpoint. And it depends though. Hawkpoint in handheld mode, in docked mode, Hawkpoint probably crushes it in efficiency, I think. Or well, yeah, I don't know if crushes it even. Yeah, my guess would be Hawkpoint, but when we say efficiency, we're talking about GPU gaming efficiency. I'm not talking about CPU, where Hawkpoint, of course, is radically better efficiency than Switch 2's CPU should have, or I think it should have better efficiency in high performance scenarios. And I know some people are sitting here going, wait, how is that even possible? Remember that Hawkpoint is a 178 millimeter square die I don't remember the die size of the Switch 2, but I don't know that it's tiny if it's on 8 nanometers. So they're using more silicon and more tweaks at really low power with some Lovelace enhancements. So, yeah, something like that, or maybe just Z1 Extreme, something like there. I feel, but the thing is, the Steam Deck's really impressive because it's purpose built. So the way I would put it is, if there was like a purpose built, I know, but yeah, Phoenix is, and it still doesn't seem that much more efficient than the Steam Deck's APU. So probably a bit better than what you see out of like Z1 X, maybe, yeah, maybe around Z1 Extreme, something like that. It's hard to say because in some scenarios, Hawkpoint would just crush it, but I could see in like the niche of 5 watts it doing very well because that's what it was built to do. Um, do. See any final questions here? Let's see. Techno writes in from the Moore's Law said Patreon and says, why don't many PC manufacturers put undervolted desktop cards in there instead of mobile chips? For example, in the Asus NUC, it has a 4070 mobile, whereas they could put a 4060 Ti in and either get similar or better performance at the same wattage while undervolted and costing less money. Oh, so you're saying why don't they just undervolt desktop cards instead of putting a 4060 Ti in? Like right now, I'm actually technically using, because my desktop is being repaired right now at Silver Knight PCs. Check out their website. That's Silver Knight PCs. Actually, they're friends of the show. That why in the desktop I have right now, my temporary one, it has actually a 16 core Zen 4, but then it has a 7600 MXT. So it's a 7600. It's it is like exactly a 7600 almost. And why use a mobile version of Navi 33 instead of just undervolting the other one? Well, I mean, because this is a you know OEM or something. Like they're not going to undervolt desktop cards manually, and then they're going to want that warranty from AMD or Nvidia so that they don't need to worry about it. I also suspect that they tend to put cards in that they got good deals on. Like think about it, 7600 MXT. How many freaking laptops have a 7600 MXT? My guess is Minis Forum just got a really good deal from AMD for these AMD mobile GPUs and are shoving them in there because they got them for real cheap. And you say, a 4070 mobile, that doesn't sound cheap to me, but it's probably cheaper than them trying to have some special version of an underclocked 4060 Ti. Also, honestly, from a marketing perspective, they can say it comes with a 4070. I hate to admit it, but that's probably another reason they would do that as well. So, like, why spend this extra money and effort undervolting things when you can use a laptop version that lets you call it a higher number, or that AMD will give you for a cheaper price? That'd be my answer for that one. All righty, so let me make sure I got through everything here. Yep, I did. And let's see. Any final questions that I think look interesting here? Did he talk about the release dates of the 50 series? I did. I said that I still think 5080, 5090 this year, but it's very clear to me that they're not rushing out the 60 anytime soon, and probably not the 70 on desktop. Um, Let's see. Yeah, all right. So I think that's going to do it for this live stream. I believe I got through everything. And so, yeah, there we go. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please make sure that you subscribe to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel and ring the bell button. Also, please support us on Patreon. If you join right now, I'm going to put out reader mails for the guest, which will be Ancient Gameplays. We'll be talking about his analysis of FSR 3.1 and upcoming AMD and Intel and Nvidia releases. So you can submit those at the lowest tier. There's also a new die shrink that just came out, talking about what considerations you should have when you're thinking about upgrading to Arrow Lake or Zen 5. Again, that's just another bonus video, no ads, only for patrons. Someone's yelling Vite Ramen. Yep, they're a great sponsor. There should be a major sponsors section in the description below. That includes them, CDkeyoffer if you need good Microsoft keys. And of course, this episode overall is just sponsored by Micro Center. So please check out those links below. Helps so much. I actually heard from some people at Micro Centers that multiple people going in recently were saying that they're there because Moore's Law is dead, said to stop waiting and just get a 7800 X3D. So when you guys do that, like go to a Micro Center and tell them Moore's Law is dead sent me, that does help this channel a lot. So it helps me get more deals for you guys, and subscribing to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel helps me get more and more guests as well and better negotiate with sponsors too. So please remember to subscribe, check out all of our content and sponsors, and join the Patreon. And I guess I'll stop shilling. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, everybody, and have a great weekend.